Heather Lockett, and this is Lasting Conversations. We have Kathie Kreh with us today. Hi, Kathie.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi there. Kathie is the president, CEO, founder, and all-around just goddess of an organization called African Orphan Education Foundation. It is a mission and an outreach organization helping orphan children and students in Kenya and Uganda. And I want to hear all about it. The work that you do is extraordinary, and it's just so much more than education, and yet the education is everything. Please share.
I couldn't agree with you more the way you stated that. That is perfect. It is about education, and that's because this is a community of young people who, without education, lose hope. And because there's so many generations who've already been through extreme poverty, hope is really what they're hanging on to. And that hope will come through education so that they themselves can pull themselves out of this extreme poverty.
So, but tell us more, some background and a little bit of statistic of why this is so important and why they actually could use a lot of help.
Very good. Well, I got my start doing mission work for about 12 years. So I got a lot of experience learning on the ground what happens with these children, many of them orphans, and some of them are orphans of circumstance. So they might have one parent, but oftentimes that parent is sent off to another, to the city, to sell items, and they're away from their children for years. Sometimes they don't come back. So even if they have a parent or two, their parents give them up for different reasons. So I got to see what happened as I was doing mission work there. And then I started doing the research on the back end of this and learning that 50% of the children in this sub-Saharan region don't go to school. And sadly, it's because they can't afford it.
Well, because there's no subsidy.
Right.
If you go to school, you have to pay for it. Is that correct?
That is true. And these are agrarian societies, meaning there's not a big tax base in our society and many others. You tax the populace in order to be able to fund the education for everyone so that everyone gets a free K through 12 education. In Africa, there isn't a tax base per se. So you have a largely agrarian society where there isn't enough funding for everyone to go to school. So if you don't pay, you don't go. And more staggering than the 50%, because it could be 50% of 10 or 50% of a very large number, 100 million children not going to school. And to put that in more perspective, when you consider the population of the United States is 330 million. So it's almost like taking 1/3 of the United States and saying they don't get to go to school. Mm-hmm. It's a large, large number. And sometimes it seems so large for even us to be able to tackle, but we don't lose sight of the fact that if we do what we're doing and others are doing what they're doing, it will all combine together and be a force.
I think that's so true. And you have shared the word that comes to mind is blossom. So you have some blossom stories, and we have all kinds of other information in this amazing coloring book. But let's go right into your blossom stories, which gets into the why and the big why, because we can all say, yes, education is important, but there's a deeper reason exponentially. And this is also why these numbers are so important, because to blossom each one of these little fruited trees that just are bubbling to learn new things. But your next thing is the people that have come through your programs, they then blossom into world renown, and they're here to help the entire planet. So I would love to start with some of those stories. The blossom stories.
It's almost like a garden. It's a garden of blossoms. Right. And you might have to cue me because there are so many that I might leave a few out. One of the blossoms is that we were connected to some individuals in different nations where we're working who didn't go through our program because we're 5 years old, even though I did mission work with another organization that's more than 15 years in the making. And we saw what happens. We have several individuals in our youth leadership group who have been recognized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, now the Gates Foundation, MasterCard Foundation, and a number of other groups, Thomson Reuters. They're well on their way. They are connected to the United Nations, and they're doing amazing work. We have one young man who said, I'm going to be president of my country. I believe him. I'm pretty sure he will be. So they are now pouring into other individuals from a number of other nations that we work with. So we have some that are they've already tried on those leadership shoes, and they are well on their way. And then we have some that are from very remote areas who are getting schooling only because of our organization. And we're not only caring to educate them and have them graduate, and that's it. That's where we started, to be honest, Heather. We started with, that's it, we're out. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was we realized that without a college education, they would not get a job. So in order to clean at a hotel, you need a 4-year degree.
Wow.
So only about a quarter of those.
Within their country.
Yes.
To clean at a hotel, they needed a 4-year degree, which they're not being provided for anyway.
Right.
See? Fascinating.
So another nugget was, okay, if that's the case, how do we drop them now? We just educated them. Now they need opportunity.
Right. You can't, what's the next level? Right.
So the next level, talk about quantum, is how do we turn these incredible young people into leaders, world leaders? Because they're not just competing with other individuals in their own nation. They need to compete on the world stage. So what do we do about that? And that's when we developed our From Leadership to Legacy leadership curriculum that we were able to develop and pilot during COVID.
Wow. Well, so there are so many branches to this tree. It just
there are.
And of course, I'm seeing the tree of life, which all started in Africa. So I know it all circles back, yes, on that quantum level and the big why. So here is this beautiful sea of humanity, and that they are people of the land that have so much richness from within. And so it's more than what we might consider, okay, now you're going to go to school and then be a political leader. No, this is all part of that synergistic giving back and growth of their society, of their countries, of their fellow human beings. Right?
Yes. And one of the things I found, this started
because all of this comes from within. We can educate, say, 100 people, and then some just are flourishing here, and then some are taking that gift and utilizing it in a different way. So I think that's where my brain was going with all that.
Again, so many angles and stories. There was one young man who was very talented musically and artistically. So he wasn't doing great in school, but he also wasn't being given the opportunity to exercise his craft, the God-given talents that he had. So I saw a video online of him playing the piano. And I said, Alvin, where'd you learn how to play that? He said, at church on the keyboard. Magnificent. And then he started coloring and doing art and putting that online on Facebook. Thank goodness for the internet and for them having phones. I said, you did this? Yes, I did this. And so once we got to the stage of having these young people vie for many grants to make their dream a reality, he said, I think I want to start an art gallery. Well, without the art instruction, which many schools don't have there, again, he wasn't able to use his gift unless someone recognized, there's your God-given talent. We need to be able to promote that and to be able to fuel that, because that's where you're strong. So he's back at school getting an architectural degree in hopes of obviously moving on further. In Uganda, if you get a certain score on your national test, the government will pay for you to go to a 4-year college. You'll get a scholarship to college.
Okay.
Most of the students, because they haven't been able to get that full 12 years of education, fall well below that standard.
I see. So let's kind of start with the basics, or start in the beginning. And I'm looking at this beautiful photo of, I don't know, we have camera angles here, of these village of beautiful, very young children. So we were just talking about some of the older kids as they're stepping into these other programs. So let's start from kind of the beginning. And of course, as this nice video that you have online describing the organization and how and why it's important, is that many of the kids, they come from humble homes, backgrounds, perhaps not electricity. Share a little bit more about beyond the book learning. There's a meal. There perhaps is food. There's other support.
Right.
And how young? What's the first age that you start?
Kindergarten.
Perfect.
Nursery school, the youngest of the young. And you're right. That's a really good point. Most of these children live in humble homes without running water, without electricity. And it's really hard for folks in our society to even comprehend what that would be like. Mm-hmm. Take the worst hurricane and you're without electricity for a while. Well, that means you can't refrigerate your food. You don't have air conditioning. It gets pretty uncomfortable very fast. Mm-hmm. And these children are learning in that environment. They have to do homework in that environment without light. But we start them very, very young. And the interesting point about COVID was that it forced us to learn. These kids go to school. Great. We're sending them to school. That is our job. What happened during COVID was the schools closed. That's where they get their only hot meal of the day. And they come from very large families. So it might be 6 or 8 or 10 children. Very, very common. So you can imagine if the parents are also relying on the school to feed a couple of their children who are being sponsored for school, mm-hmm. when the school's closed, not only does the education end, the food ends.
Right. And we had that here. And that organizations had to step up, or the school system had to figure out, we still have to feed a bunch of our kids because they weren't getting meals that they would normally have during the day. So one of the things that we're going to get into appreciation. And again, this is not a glossy word. This is really a heart-centered thing, which you and I have had many conversations about this from their own come from. They're so happy, essentially, and that there is already this broad worldly perspective and inherent thank you. But again, not from our Americanized version of a thank you. This is a deeply rooted. So one of the things that I joined you guys with were letters of encouragement to the kids. But then you also shared some of the letters and feedback that you get. So tap into some of this in terms of, again, it gets into the why and how they are of a generous nature. And so this reciprocity of, it's just joy. It's a joyful thing that's happening here.
Going back to hope and realizing that without a lot of other distractions in life, so what we do in the U.S., we call busyness or distraction. They don't have a lot of the same opportunity or distractions. Mm-hmm. So they're much more focused on the land, where things come from. They survive day to day. And they often don't look too far ahead. We'll get into the book in a little while. Yep. But they're also oftentimes discouraged from thinking too much about their future because they've come from a generation or two that also thought there might be a future and it didn't happen.
Right.
So they are discouraged from being encouraged. And obviously you've known me for a while. I am the master encourager.
You are.
I am very, very positive, and I see the silver lining in everything. It's hard to knock me down. It's very apparent that they're some of the poorest children in the poorest conditions on the planet. And we work very remote. So we don't even go to the big cities. We'll go 4 hours out, and I might be the first person that is not of color that they've ever seen.
With your shiny blonde hair and your very pale skin and your height and everything. Yeah.
And they point, and we're called Mzungus. Mm-hmm. So Mzungu. Okay. We kind of shrug our shoulders and say, I'm a Mzungu. It's fine.
And what does that mean?
We are. A white person.
There you go.
So that's who we are. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool. I'm a Mzungu. Mm-hmm. I actually bought a shirt that says I'm a Mzungu. there's so much joy. And I think this is one of the things we've talked about. You've got this whole population of young people who, from our standards, have so little.
Mm-hmm.
They have few belongings. They have few opportunities. The joy is off the charts. And it is a faith among the people. It is appreciation of what they do have. It is gratitude for that the sun comes up every day and they feel warmth. They are so much more grateful for every little thing that does happen, that they just radiate joy throughout their entire nation. And there's so many visitors to Africa who, this is why people get connected there and feel so connected and want to go back, because they feel the joy that they've perhaps never felt here.
Mm-hmm. So the photo, when I was looking, doing a little research last night and just seeing the photos of you while you've been there, because you spent a number of years there before this incarnation of this program. But the joy from you is no wonder, it's your calling. You just feel very much at home here. But your dad brought you guys there for a time. You want to start from those beginnings.
I do have a connection to Africa that goes as far back as my father. And I don't know if I would have been connected to Africa without that connection. Perhaps I would have, perhaps I would not have. He won a Rotarian ambassadorial scholar when he was in college. And the University of Cape Town had just opened up as one of the possibilities for him to go. So he pretty much spun the globe and said, I want to go there. And they said, great, that just opened up as an option. So he decided to travel to Cape Town. And I think one of the most interesting parts about this Rotarian scholarship was, if you know anything about this incredible service organization, you have to do a service in order to give back because of what they have provided for you. He decided to study tribal relations in 1950 and 51 and traveled throughout East, Central, and Southern Africa across many different boundaries and talked to people, and then wrote stories and wrote articles. And he had all of those brought back and published in the New York Daily News, so that he actually had a record of the different tribes, the different tribal leaders,
Wow.
the chiefs, the chieftains. It really was amazing. And I, as a young girl at the time, was mesmerized. The old Kodak clicking slideshows that you used to watch, he would show on the wall, and I would watch them and feel that I was transported to that place and that I wanted to be there. And I couldn't get enough. So that was my first connection to Africa. I didn't go with him until he was well up in age, and he needed a travel companion. So when everyone else in the family shook their shoulders and rolled their eyes, oh my gosh, Dad wants to go to Africa, I had just about jumped out of my shoes. I was the one that was going to go to Africa with him, and that was how it all started. And I had already planned to do some of the mission work beyond that. So one thing led to another.
And all the stars aligned, and now you're doing this. And what's your dad's name?
Henry, or Bud. His nickname was Bud Kreh.
Nice. Well, and what a bank of work, right? We were talking earlier today about stories and history and legacy. So what a legacy of work to do, and to be doing all that travel back then and during who knows what kind of political conflicts and things. So the historians, it's another piece of my heart, is history and legacy and story. So yay to Bud.
Right.
Let's go ahead. Again, we have so many tributaries that we could really go to, but this book here, it's a coloring book, also a piece of my heart. Mercy's Magnificent Dreams. If you can see it, you can be it. It's a story and coloring book. This will also tap into what we were just talking about in terms of the word that was coming up earlier for me was wellspring, this wellspring of joy and knowledge, but to share. So tell us about this coloring book. And really, each page is its own kind of lesson and parable, but really, first of all, it's a coloring book. And so it's there to bring color and to bring joy. But tell us more about Mercy's Magnificent Dreams.
We are so proud of this little project, again, that started during COVID. And again, with the children not going to school, our funds had to stop being distributed in Africa.
Right.
So now not only are the
wait,
children...
your funds even had to stop?
Correct.
Oh, really?
Because all we do is educate children, and the education ended.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even, that's a whole another level.
It's a whole nother level.
Learn something new every day.
Right.
That even the funding, everything stopped. When everything stopped, everything stopped.
Right.
Wow.
So now you have children not only not learning, but not eating. And we very quickly, after a period of paralysis that lasted maybe 2 days, we came to the realization that we've got to supply the curricula. We've got to write it.
In some form or another.
In some form or another.
Right.
Maybe we won't get it out in time for this pandemic, but when the next one hits, we'll be ready. Mm-hmm. We will have a literacy tool for the younger kids that'll be fun, and they can learn from it, and they learn English. So if they've been schooled up through 3rd or 4th grade, they're speaking English. That's great. So it's an English literacy tool that we didn't have a budget for it. Again, it happened during COVID, and we came up with this brainy idea that, I know, let's write one. So that's how most of our projects start. Someone says, I know, let's try this. And before you know it, we're off to the races doing.
It's all very organic.
It's all very organic.
Yep.
Without a budget, we didn't have anyone to illustrate it. So I, as an art enthusiast and an art lover.
You've got beautiful art.
As an art lover, I said, I know. Now here's an interesting idea. We have an entire community of artists in Palm Beach County. And if I know an artist's heart, it's usually, I'm a starving artist. I don't make a lot of money, so I can't give anything. Well, yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can.
You can give me an illustration, and that will be your contribution to Africa.
Right.
So we went into the art community and said, would you please help us illustrate this book? And we ended up with a 60-page book, completely illustrated by Palm Beach County artists. Some did 2 or 3 illustrations. And there is a storyline in the story. It's about Mercy. Now, another nugget is there is a real Mercy. And one of the other main characters in the book is Colin. There is a real Colin.
So there are real people or real kids there.
People who are students in our program. And the story goes through them going to school.
Right.
And walking to school, of course, and what they learn in school, and inspiring them to be anything they want to be, because they're told often the opposite. And in abject poverty, you're told not to dream. We tell them the opposite. We're like, look, we know we can carry you through that education, so please don't stop dreaming. It's time to begin. So this story really is a nugget for them and a beautiful seed that says, we're going to show you the way. We want to stand behind you. We're going to encourage you to dream because we know it's possible. You may not think it is, and the community you're in may not think it is, but we know it is.
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if there's a page or two that you would want to read for us, is that, I mean, there are coloring books and there are stories and storylines. What you were really, really mindful of is that this whole storyline is from their perspective. It's from their village. It's from their own come from, with the spark that you're describing. So tell us how, like, where your initial something has to be different. You know, when you're saying you brought supplies and other coloring books, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Over the years, we had always brought coloring books to these far out villages because the kids know how to color. Mm-hmm. And that was our connection to the children. But we noticed all those coloring books were of the Avengers and Mickey Mouse. And there was something that didn't strike me as, you know, I almost, my heart broke.
Which is all fun and it's fun and good. And then to your point that you were sharing earlier, your heart was breaking because they're seeing Mickey Mouse, who they will never meet. They may never see a cartoon. They may never really know the Avengers. That fantasy world for kids here was not available to them. Well, it's a kind of a disconnect of, okay,
Correct.
What does this even mean?
So once again, along this whole path of, I know, I have an idea. Let's make the book look like them. Mm-hmm. So for those who can't see the book, if we describe it, we had all of our artists spend time in a photo gallery of our trips.
Right.
And for example, the little girls in most of the villages we go in, they shave their heads. So we want little girls with shaved heads. we want the children who read this book to look at it and go, that's me.
Right.
That's my life. That's my village. And to feel proud of who they are, to dignify their lifestyle and their livelihood. And in the latter part of the book, as the children are dreaming about what they want to become, we have a little over a dozen careers. Well, we didn't want the careers to be westernized careers. We wanted to dignify what their parents might do. A seamstress. We have a seamstress in there, or someone who works at the lobby of a hotel. That's what many of them will have opportunities to do, and we want them to feel proud of it. So we put all of those careers in there, but we also added, you want to be a pilot? You can be a pilot. Do you want to be an engineer? You can be that too. And one of the pages has a female president. But of course, it looks like the chief of a tribe. She's a female chief of a tribe. So it goes in so many different directions. It dignifies where they live. It dignifies their culture, how they dress. It dignifies who they are and says, or you could be perfectly happy being just who you are. You don't need to be anything else.
I love that so much because you're not there to change anybody or to change a culture or to change anything. You're there to do that blossoming and encouraging and inspiring. I love one of the little pages that popped out. You can inspire to become a nurse. You can have imagination to do this or this, but that is different than it's coming in to say, come do it our way. So this is what I just love about your very mission is it's a different kind of mission. It's not the old school. It's now seeing from inside.
Right. Seeing it from their perspective.
Yeah.
And I think, so many different elements are connecting. Mm-hmm. So many different elements. So part of the dreaming of this book, Mercy's Magnificent Dreams, also started connecting at the same time with the From Leadership to Legacy leadership curriculum we were developing for the older students and young adults. So that's all about dreaming. So part of the leadership curriculum had every student create a dream board. Realizing, of course, that if you don't know how to envision what you want, you'll never get there. You have to know what you want first. So there's also a lesson in critical thinking. If you can't envision, you'll be lost. Mm-hmm. You must envision what you want first. So we realize we're planting all those seeds in those little minds too, and then telling them they can get there. So it's a message of hope. For all the talk of mental health, this is total positivity, and there's no lie, and you can do anything you want to. It's the truth.
Right.
So we're standing behind these young people. We're already providing them an education, but we also realize that if this book gets into the hands of one of our students who gets to go to school, and they have 5 or 6 siblings who don't, this book can then be shared mm-hmm. from the student who has the book to siblings who don't get to go to school. So we could have a multiplying effect with this literacy program that says it's in the hands of one, but it's going to reach 10.
Well, and one of the things that just came to mind, it gets back to the we factor and perhaps the village factor. So if there's, or is there, I'm going to ask it as a question, is there almost an inherent understanding that here's one child who can go, and we understand that it can't be everybody, but that's actually okay mm-hmm. because there's this inherent value and give back. Am I getting that right?
You are hitting every point so beautifully. I would say that not only is touching the book, Mercy's Magnificent Dreams, but also comes in with our leadership curriculum. Mm-hmm. The reason we didn't just take a leadership program here and plant it over there was because there's a huge cultural difference. In their culture, there is no such thing as I. In our society, it's all about I. I need to be first. I need to get there first. I need to compete. In their village life, everything is we. So they would not understand a leadership curriculum that was designed here and just planted over there. And that's why we had to develop it on our own. Again, realizing that we need to respect their culture and do it in a way that will meld with and jive with and dignify and love their culture, just embrace their culture. We don't want to change them.
Right. Because they don't need any changing.
That is true.
And you have people there, kind of boots on the ground. You will get to travel, which is the first time in a number of years, which is fantastic. But that said, so a lot of, your work is done overseas in the States, but do you also have board members or other people that that this is really their own grassroots organization that you are now a part of? Yeah.
We do.
You're at the helm, but they are there, and that's that synergistic feedback, so that it's a homegrown program.
Right. It truly is a collaboration. So the one organization I had volunteered with for the first 10, 12 years is our partner in Uganda. So they are a very, very small mission group that started in one village, originally had a very big vision of moving throughout Africa and maybe beyond Africa. But the need consumes these mission groups. They have hearts of gold, but they are usually very constrained for resources. And when they see the need around them, they can't say no. So they keep trying to meet more and more and more needs. So the one that we work with now, the name is 2J Ministries, not the food chain, 2J, but it's TUJJE, which in their mother tongue means let's go. So we still work with them. They are our partner on the ground. They are a nonprofit registered here in the U.S., as are we, but they maintain the African team on the ground there. So they have an executive director. They have mentors. They have community health partners. So in essence, we're working alongside them. And our vision is, let us take care of the education so you can take care of more health concerns, more water, more mosquito nets. We're not quite there yet, but our vision is to take over all of the education, and then in the multiple nations and villages that we're working in, have best practices across those multiple villages and communities where we serve.
That's just so beautiful. And that there is a synergy among the different countries even, but just from what you're doing, everybody's playing well in the sandbox together to make these visions come forward. Is that true?
That's a very interesting question. We operate a little differently than each of them do. Mm-hmm. So I would say in the beginning, there was a little bit of everyone trying to decide exactly where they fit.
We have to figure out how is this going to work, right?
And how we fit into what they're doing without changing what they're doing, because they came first. And we really want to be of help. The partner we have in Kenya operates a little differently than the one in Uganda. So we're the ones, for the most part, that are doing the shape shifting all of the time to make sure that we're not upsetting their processes, because they work.
Right.
But we're coming alongside of them and learning how we can be of the greatest help to them. And what we would really love to do is take all the education off their hands.
So this is a perfect segue. How can we here and the listeners perhaps help you in this journey that we're all on? I'm going to say that you're on, but really we are all on it. And that gets into, so I've got 3 questions, bing, bing, bing. It gets into the big why, because it's very, very important. And obviously, we all have to pick our own battles, and we all have things here close to home that we're doing and working on. That said, question, how much are you talking about? It wouldn't necessarily, because sometimes we're thinking, well, this is thousands and thousands of dollars, but really, how much to educate one child? And then obviously, if there are bigger donors, that's even better. The other thing is, I want to tap into, mention the CNN. Wasn't that a young woman?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So talk to the CNN, because this gets into the big why. Like, why Africa? Why should any of us pay attention? Because they are our brothers and sisters, and they are our future for all of us.
You don't leave anything out, Heather.
I know.
I mean, you just go everywhere. I love it. Let's start with the why from the standpoint of Africa and how important Africa is. It becomes more important the more research you do. So when you think of it from a macro standpoint and realize that that is the last bastion of potential for a rising middle class on the planet, That is also a place where all of the earth minerals are. It's a rich, rich, rich continent. So everyone wants a piece of it. And this is all part of the story. But if the folks on the ground don't understand what they have,
it's theirs.
and the value
it's theirs first.
of it,
we're not colonizing anymore,
correct.
people. We're not.
It's theirs.
It's
and
theirs.
Nobody else's.
Right.
They need to understand the value of what they have and to say, no, you're not getting any today. Or you want it for 300 million. I'm sorry, it's worth 10 times that. You can't have it. So in order for those who have it to protect it, and to make it available to the next generation. So I think that's one of the points, is realizing that every time we go over, the plane is half full with missionaries and half full with investors and innovators and people who are investing into businesses there. So the latest bridge that was built over the Nile was built by Japan. There is a lot of investment from China, the Road and Bridge Initiative. There are a lot of people with their hands in Africa. Part of that's good because it'll open up opportunities for them. And we just had a wonderful speaker. We have monthly youth advisory calls on Zoom where we open it up to 7 different nations. And we had an incredible international business attorney on this past Saturday. And we are talking with our youth, with the young people, about the African continental free trade area. What does that mean? The average American doesn't even know about it. But that is what is going to allow all of their entrepreneurial businesses to thrive. Because right now, in order to do business between Uganda and Kenya, you have different currency, different language, different legal compliance matters from nation to nation. And most of these nations are the size of a state. So imagine us trying to do business with the rest of the US, but every state has different rules, different currency, different language. It would be impossible. This is one of the things that has held them all back and has held the rest of the world back. They are on the precipice of exploding. David Akwara, one of our friends of our organization, is a famous filmmaker out of Nigeria who is working on a podcast. That's what we're on. A documentary series called The Rise. And he has done premieres all over the continent. He's going to be at the UN next week doing his premiere and educating people on what's happening in Africa. It's ready to explode, but it's not quite there yet. We do have, like you said, we have several of our youth leaders connected to the UN. We have individuals connected to our organization who are part of the African Union, European Parliament. We have diplomats
that have come through your program, or just their representative within what you're trying to establish here.
They're representing us to other parts of the world, and they're part of us. So there are diplomatic circles that are opening up. There are students of ours, and even you mentioned CNN. So Nellie Shaboy, an incredible young lady, her story is very similar. She was born in Kenya, in, I think it's pronounced Mogotio, a village that's hours and hours outside of Nairobi. And she just happened to have an opportunity to win a college scholarship through a lottery, and she won one. I won't go through the whole story, but she won one, and she went to Augustana College outside of Chicago and decided to get into coding and IT. And she was very good at it and ended up starting a nonprofit called Tech Lit Africa and refurbishing laptops to send them back over to her village. Well, lo and behold, she ended up starting Tech Lit Africa. She and her significant other that she met on campus decided, instead of continuing the organization, their company in the US, why not relocate it to Mogotio and hire the whole village? So that's what they've done. It's a beautiful story. She just won CNN Hero of the Year. She was a Forbes 30 under 30. And these are the stories that are popping up all over Africa. The children and the talent that are coming from these nations and villages are the same as talent coming out of any other city or community in any other place in the world. The only difference is if they're not given a voice or an opportunity, they'll never get to blossom. But when they get the opportunity, pop, 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 it's like popcorn. It's great. And we need this. The next, I was going to say, physicist, the next astronomist. These are young people who've been given gifts, and we need those gifts to be nurtured. And we need those gifts to be known by the rest of humanity because they may cure cancer. It's there. It's already there. We just need to bring it to the forefront of the rest of humanity and say, the talent's there. We've seen it. We need to nurture it. We need to grow it.
This is the speechless part because all the goosebumps started, which is always a great part of the whole show is when the goosebumps start, because this is that wellspring and the blossoming from within. And you're just sprinkling and sprinkling and sprinkling and giving voice. And then the voices are being heard. And it is a whole new day. It is definitely a whole new day.
Yeah. And I think one of the other beautiful parts about what we're doing is connecting people in Palm Beach County in the U.S. to village residents in the middle of nowhere, Africa. It's not the middle of nowhere to them. It's the middle of nowhere to us. In their minds, we're in the middle of nowhere. So we're connecting humanity to humanity. Like you said at the top of the podcast, brothers and sisters. These are our sons. These are our daughters. These are our uncles and our cousins. And we're simply meeting them for the first time. I didn't know you were here. This is awesome.
See, that could just make me cry.
Right. And we have students here and young people here. Oh, one of my favorite stories. We have a young lady who is a medical student at the Miller School of Medicine in Miami. And she went through our program for about 1.5 years and was on all the calls. And I won't get into the details. It's something that affects girls only. But suffice it to say that the girls had questions about what the girls do when they don't have access to products. And my answer was, I don't know. Would you like to find out? And they said, yeah, we do. So we put a survey together. We put it up on Google Forms. We had 200 original surveys completed from 7 different nations because our youth there would line up the girls in the school and one by one, have them take the survey on their phone because they didn't have access to the survey. So we got 200 surveys completed. And the most beautiful part about this story is this student, medical student here, a little later came to me and said, Kath, I think that I'm changing the whole, she saw herself as a more traditional or common doctor, maybe an emergency room physician in her career, but she had never imagined working somewhere else on the globe or doing work in developing nations. And she said, this is changing the trajectory of my medical career. And that's the beautiful part, is someone here being exposed to something over there and saying, but I didn't know that existed. Well, that's the cool part. It does. And they may not know that what you're doing exists. We do have a young lady in Kenya who is also getting medical training with the Kenya Red Cross. And what she said to me at one point is, I can't wait for you to get here. And if anything ever happens, I want to work on you. I want to save your life.
See.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're just connecting.
We're just connecting, a bunch of brothers and sisters we just haven't met yet. I love that. So how can we help? What is it? How if anybody is interested in this coloring book, which is more than just a coloring book, it's a nice little vignette of stories and inspiration and hope. Right. But the proceeds of the book help in what fashion? So let's get into some other, I guess, financial logistics, and the heart follows the finances, and let's just do that part.
Right. How to help.
Yeah.
The book, when sold as a single copy, we do have some funds left, and that all goes toward our kids and our program. So that's a beautiful thing. So the single copy sales help there. But if we have a school or an after-school program or a charity who wants to distribute these to their children because they have...
Here in the States.
Here in the States, right.
So you will have books, you can take them there. But these are fun to have right here in the United States. Right?
So we will, instead of the single copy cost, we take the cost in half, And we just have a minimal number that you need to buy, and you can now distribute them basically at our cost to help children here.
Right.
Because now they're learning about what the children over there do. So we're connecting more people. So that's another beautiful thing. We do have a program called Dream Launchers, and our Dream Launchers are recurring monthly supporters. Most of them do $20 per month, but any level is fine, so long as it's something that you feel good about giving, and we can tell you it's going to a great place. We do not have, at this point, anyone on staff. No one is paid. We are all volunteers, and basically it's a working board. That's all we have. We don't have anyone that's paid on staff to get the work done. We kind of scrape our knuckles and our knees and get it done ourselves, and we're still paying for our own travel over there. So we don't even have that paid for. So those who know us really well, it's one of the reasons they give is they know exactly where the funding is going, and they know the name of their student, and they get letters from their student and report cards from their student. Oftentimes their student writes back, not always, but most of the time their student writes back. And we always let them know, if you want to go meet your student, you can come with us when we go. So it's all transparent. There's nothing to hide. Come enjoy, come experience this child. It's amazing what you're doing by paying their school fees. And that's basically what they do. They pay for their school fees, their uniform, their shoes, their supplies. And in Africa, what they call personal requirements. We don't really have them here in the States, but what it means is when you come to school, you're going to bring 5 rolls of toilet paper and 2 rolls of paper towels and 5 brooms. So the schools put the onus on the children to supply the school with what it needs for the year. So they're taking all of their needs and dividing it by the number of students. So the personal requirements our sponsors are also paying for. It basically keeps the hole open for all of the children. So that's the Dream Launcher. In terms of sponsoring a student, we, in the early years, had people pay exactly what it was to sponsor a student based on their costs. But it got complicated very quickly. Because you have different schools, different levels, and different nations do it very differently. So unfortunately, at one point, the amounts were all over the board, and it was very difficult to tell somebody what it really costs, because the answer is always, well, it varies. But in order to get students sponsored, what we do now, although we did have some folks come in very early and are grandfathered in at those original levels, we do it a little differently and say, when you reach a certain giving level on an annual basis with our organization, we will extend you the privilege of becoming an individual student sponsor. And what happens then is we may have a little left over at the end of the year. So if we are, the donor gives us $1,000 in a year, but the schooling for a high school student is $785, the remaining funds stay in our restricted fund and help other students. So if we have a sponsor drop out, we will not pull the child out of school. We need to continue to pay that student's fees until we replace the sponsor. So that's what we call our gap insurance, which means once the children start with us, they stay with us, and we will keep them in school by putting the onus on us to go find a new sponsor.
Thank you for all of that information. And I know that you have mentioned before, there's a bit of a timing thing, and most importantly, like you said, so that either a student can do it and you have the funding for X number of students, or you can't. And so that becomes, there's a bit of a deadline, if you will, even, but that you have to pay, or not, the schools are expecting a year, not even a month to month, because the worst case scenario is to start and have to pull a child out.
Right. And it's one of the reasons we're structured the way we are. There are other organizations, some of them very, very fine, incredible international organizations. Another misconception, I think, is a lot of the organizations want people to give. So they're always starting at that entry level. It only costs this to sponsor a child and to send them to school. Yes, that's true when they're in kindergarten or first grade or second, but once they go to high school, those costs double. One of the problems in Africa is most of the students, 42% of the children, will never get past primary school. Well, that's a problem. So if you're giving because it's affordable, but you can't afford to send them to high school, that's another part of the problem. So we start at the high school level, which is usually right around $1,000 a year. and then take any of the balance that isn't covering a particular student who might be less expensive and keep it in the restricted fund. And we actually look at, we call it the 4 Ps. It's alliteration. We look with those funds at preferred schools. So if a child is in a school that isn't A-rated, we put them in a better school. They're all boarding by about grade 6 or 7. So we're paying for all of their boarding costs with that as well. We're feeding them every day. And so the other Ps are the gap protection. So that's our insurance policy that if a sponsor cannot renew year to year, we cover the student until we can replace the sponsor. And also our proprietary leadership curriculum. They're all going to get it for free. They're all going to go through that leadership program, which we hope eventually to go online and to be able to support thousands of students who aren't even ours. Just, we want it to go to everyone. But it will always be available to our students. And that's really pretty much how we operate, is student sponsors, dream launchers, and having folks underwrite some of the programs that we do, like the books.
That's just, it's all so beautiful. And like you said, there are thousands and thousands of nonprofits in the world, and even just here within Palm Beach County in the United States. So let me find the best words for this. You guys are, you had said, transparent. You're boots on the ground. You're not all top heavy in terms of, there are a lot of people who very legitimately are worried, well, if I'm sending $10, how many pennies get to where I'm thinking I'm donating? Mm. And so the other places aren't wrong or bad, but you guys are the real deal, doing the real deal things. And I've read some of the letters from the students and the people that are there that are just so, again, such full of joy, and that they're offering love back. I don't know if you can remember, you didn't bring any of the letters, but let's kind of end there. Well, on that business piece, you have a sign here that says top rated nonprofits endorsed by clients, volunteers, and their community number 2022. So you guys are well represented. You're well representing your donors, the folks that you're servicing, and all of the people, even within the political structure and the villages themselves. So this is a very big deal. And it's full of grace, and it's clearly bigger than you, right?
Much.
All of this, what we're doing is way bigger than us.
Bigger, much bigger.
And so see if you can remember some of the little notes or quotes from some of the students. Like this is part of the joy.
Well, each of the notes is incredible. You're right. When we did the letters of encouragement, I probably brought 30 or 40 letters that the children write to their sponsors. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite, that they look onto each other's notes. What are you writing to your sponsor? Here's what I'm writing to mine. So sometimes you'll see things repeated, which becomes entertaining at times. Like, first of all, they thank you for the school fees, and they thank you for their books. They thank you for their uniform. They thank you for the meal they get. They know, even if they're young and they don't quite understand how it's all working together, they're getting a little bit of instruction from a teacher or an administrator or a mentor who also is part of our team. But when they get a little older and they say, thank you so much for helping me get an education, boy, do I hope you have a long life, because they understand that they want everything to happen for you. They want you to be blessed for the longest time because they realize you're blessing them. So it's this beautiful, they want to feed this incredible operation that sees how important they are, because not everybody does. Mm-hmm. A lot of people look down on them and it's like, no, you guys are not seeing this correctly. They are the magic. They are the beauty. We've got to give them the opportunity, and they will sprout. Like you said, they will bloom, they will blossom. So the letters, I treasure them. And talk about treasuring, when the children get the letter from their sponsors, you've seen us put stickers on, mm-hmm. We go crazy with stickers and fun things for the kids to enjoy. Some of them live in thatched huts. Some of them are in kind of soft walls huts, and some of them, they have over there what they call bed sitters, which is for the older students. You rent a bed. So it's almost more like a hostel mm-hmm. Environment. where it's not like what we have here, but they will take anything that they have received from their sponsor and it will basically be on the wall behind them for decades or for as long as the paper will last. It's amazing to go into some of these humble abodes and ask and say, whose picture is that on the wall? Or where did you get that from? And it may have been someone who wrote to them 20 or 30 years ago. So this is when they're older or they're in college. They don't throw them away.
I'm speechless.
They don't throw them away. So whatever you write is going to last into eternity unless the paper, just falls apart. They treasure it day after day after day after day. So the letter brings hope. The provisions bring hope. The opportunity, the options, and we just let them know. We want to make sure they understand this is not a handout.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a handout. You're not being given anything but an opportunity like so many other people get. We're just trying to level the playing field. And we're doing it in a way that these young children in the most vulnerable conditions in slums have the same chance as anybody here. Mm-hmm. And that makes me feel really good.
And we can end on that note. And also just tapping back and the joy that they have received. And that's that infinite value. Like they feel seen and heard, and that they're essentially calling back to, well, here's to a long life to you. You're wishing us a long and prosperous life. I wish it well for you as well. And there it is.
There it is.
And there it is. Kathie Kreh. Oh, I don't want to end without you. Tell us where to find you.
So sorry. I get carried away very easily.
I know. We're just going to land on a cloud and just float off.
I get carried away easily.
Where to find you?
We are at African Orphan Education.org. So even though our name is a little bit longer, we condensed it a bit, so we're easier to find, but it's African Orphan Education.org. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, in some cases under my own name, which is Kathie Kreh, Kreh, and YouTube. We have a little YouTube channel where you can see our 2-minute video and some of the messages, public service announcements that can run in a number of different places that we take ourselves when we're out there.
Kathie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Please be sure to like, follow, review, and share this podcast. And if you'd like to be part of the conversations, send emails to podcasts@lastingconversations.com and follow us on Facebook. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.